The year is 70 AD. You're standing in a tunnel beneath the Colosseum. You can hear 50,000 people above you. The ground is vibrating. The roar is so loud you can feel it in your chest. You're about to walk out into that arena. And here's the thing nobody tells you. You actually want to be here. The movies got gladiators completely wrong. The reality is stranger, darker, and somehow even more fascinating than anything Hollywood ever put on screen, because Roman gladiators weren't just condemned men thrown to their deaths for entertainment. They were something far more complicated than that. So let's go back. Let's find out what it was actually like to be one. First, who even became a gladiator? The obvious answer is slaves. And yes, many gladiators were slaves or prisoners of war, men captured in battle, shipped to Rome in chains, and sold to a lanista, a gladiator trainer who was essentially a businessman running a very violent sports team. But here's the part that stops people cold. By the end of the Roman Republic, nearly half of all gladiators were volunteers. Free Roman citizens, men who could have lived a normal life, willingly signed a contract, gave up their legal rights, and stepped into the arena by choice. They were called the Octorati, and they chose this life for the same reasons people do reckless things today: fame, money, and the desperate need to feel alive. Because in ancient Rome, a successful gladiator wasn't just a fighter, he was a celebrity. If you became a gladiator, your life started at the ludus, the gladiatorial training school, and it was nothing like a dungeon. You had a room, you had food, more food than most Romans ever saw. You had a personal physician. The famous Dr. Galen, one of the greatest physicians in all of ancient history, began his entire career treating gladiators, because a gladiator wasn't just a person, he was an investment, and investments get taken care of. Your diet was built for mass and endurance: barley, beans, lentils, oatmeal. The Romans had a nickname for you: hordeari, barley men. And that diet wasn't an insult, it was strategy. Researchers studying gladiator skeletons found their bones had extraordinarily high calcium levels. They even drank a tonic made of wood ash after training, a calcium supplement. These men were eating and supplementing like professional athletes, 2,000 years before sports science existed. But here's the detail that ruins every movie scene: gladiators were not lean and chiseled, they were deliberately bulked up. A thick layer of body fat protected their vital organs in the arena. A deep cut to a padded stomach looks terrifying to the crowd, but rarely kills. A deep cut to a lean, exposed body goes straight through to something important. The fat was armor. You trained every single day with wooden weapons heavier than the real ones, building strength, building endurance, building the specific movements of your fighting style. Because gladiators weren't just fighters, they were specialists, different types, different weapons, always matched against opponents with contrasting styles, all all designed to create the most dramatic show possible. You weren't just an athlete, you were a performer. Then came fight day. The Colosseum held 50,000 people, and they knew your name before you ever stepped onto that sand. Gladiators were the biggest celebrities in Rome. Their faces were painted on city walls. Their names were carved into graffiti across Pompeii. One inscription, still readable today, says this about a fighter named Celadus the Thracian, the delight of all the girls. This man had fan mail. In 70 AD, the crowd didn't just watch, they obsessed. They had favorite fighters, followed rivalries, bet enormous sums of money on outcomes. The atmosphere in the Colosseum on fight day was not unlike a modern stadium on championship night: noise, energy, madness. And here's what everyone gets wrong about what happened inside that arena: death was rare. Studies of gladiator remains suggest only about 10 to 15% of arena fights ended in a fatality. Not because Romans were merciful, but because they were practical. A dead gladiator was an asset destroyed. The lanista had paid a fortune for that fighter. Training him took months. Killing him in round one was a terrible return on investment. When a fighter went down, the crowd decided. They would shout, "Missio," spare him. And most of the time, most crowds chose to spare the loser, because a fighter who keeps coming back is a story, and everyone wants to see how the story ends. If you won, you received a prize: money, a golden crown, a palm branch held above your head while 50,000 people screamed your name. The sound alone must have been worth everything. And if you were really good, the rewards went even further. A successful gladiator could accumulate real wealth. Fans sent gifts, Patrons funded your fights. Wealthy Romans invited you to their homes. Your sweat, actual bottled gladiator sweat, was sold across the city as a beauty product. Roman women rubbed it on their skin as a beauty treatment because of what you represented. Take a moment with that. Some gladiators became so famous, so untouchable, that when their owner offered them freedom, they refused. A gladiator named Flama fought 34 times across his career. He won 21, drew 9, lost only 4. He was offered his freedom, the rudes, a wooden sword symbolizing liberation, not once, not twice, 4 separate times. He turned it down every single time. He chose the arena. He died at 30 years old, still fighting, and his gravestone lists every single one of those bouts, because even in death, that record was who he was. But we can't romanticize this. Not completely. Many gladiators never made it past their first few fights. Disease, infection, training injuries, these killed as many as the arena ever did. You lived under the complete control of your lanista. You could be sold, punished, forced into a fight before your wounds had healed. On bad days, the crowd wasn't merciful. On bad days, the sponsor of the games wanted blood, and blood is what they got. You were celebrated and disposable at the same time. So, what was it actually like to be a Roman gladiator? It was like being the most famous person in the room who still couldn't leave. You had glory, but not freedom. You had fans, but not rights. You walked into an arena of 50,000 screaming people and performed, knowing that on any given day, it could be your last. And some men chose that willingly. Maybe that says something about what humans will trade for a moment of feeling truly alive. If you want to know what it was like to be another figure from history, drop it in the comments. And if you made it to the end of this video, you might as well